Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Mercedes have confirmed one key advantage they have over their opposition going into their development for 2023, but the FIA have banned one of their intended innovations towards the end of last season from being used on the W14. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Let's dive in. First of all, news from Formula 1, the Dutch Grand Prix will be extended, so it was already going to be on next year's calendar. It's now going to be in 2024 and 2025 as well, so not a massive long-term deal. There's some really long-term deals getting done with Australia, getting done with, other circuits in the Middle East as well. But Zandvoort will be around with its orange army until at least 2025, I think deservedly so. Let's dive into the Mercedes stuff then. We saw yesterday that podcast that Toto Wolff did with F1 Beyond the Grid. Lots of interesting points, especially regarding Mattia Binotto that he talked about in yesterday's video. But obviously the key point is for them next season, can they actually produce a car that's capable of winning? They've got the team, they've got the drivers. They didn't have the car last season. They've got an entire year of failure, effectively, apart from that one race in Brazil, to prosper going forward. And they did an additional episode of their kind of a debrief, right? So usually they do this after each race weekend. They've done another one at the end of the season, about 10 minutes long. Not much was said. I'll kind of give you guys the highlights here in a second from the video, where they were discussing, first of all, what their learnings from the W13 mean for the W14. That was Chauve talking about Andrew Chauvelin, but then James Voles, Valtteri James, was talking about, towards the end of the video, about the motivation internally within the team. And look, I'm sure there's also motivation within the other teams, but Mercedes possibly more so than most, given where they were and now where they find themselves, especially given the fact that they had so many kind of successes towards the end of last season when they were getting consistent, but double podiums right back in France and stuff like that, building towards that win they had in Brazil, the 1-2 of course, with maximum points on the Sunday, and the progress they made to get towards that point with the upgrades they brought and that helped them get in that direction. I'm sure that's fired up and motivated the team internally. Ferrari right now might be a bit of a shambles internally. Yes, Binotto's still there, but who knows who their next guy is going to be. And Red Bull, yes, they're on top, but when you get to the top, that's when it can be more difficult to maintain that motivation. So he reckons the motivation internally is very high, but also there's another key strength they have that the other teams haven't had to deal with.
Are we fully aware of all the flaws of the W13, and are we able to address those for the W14 car? Well, it's fair to say that by the time you've got to the end of the season, you've raced across a whole range of circuits, you should have pretty much understood all the issues. And certainly by the end of the year, whilst we still had some problems with the car that were making us less competitive at some tracks, those were not new problems. Those were problems that we could anticipate and that have been there for quite a while. Now, the big body of work that's been going on for the last number of months has been to make sure that those issues on the 13 don't get carried into the 14. And we've made good progress there. Now, you can see that in some of the later updates, particularly the update that we brought to Austin, just put us that bit closer to the front. So a lot of our focus was making sure we can develop an update kit, bring it to the track, and actually see it translate to performance. And hopefully the culmination of that work will mean that we can get an altogether more competitive package together for next year.
I think just looking around the factory, you can just see everyone is incredibly motivated by what happened last year, and more importantly, by wanting to get back onto that top step and consistently showing the world and other teams that we know how to win. We want to be back there, and we have an opportunity to get back there across the winter. You never know what's going to happen. You have a number of teams that are fiercely doing what we're doing, which is every single day scraping for a millisecond or more. But the reality is that we're in a strong position here in terms of the learning that we can build on from last year. And everything I see around is just everyone wanting to win and doing everything they can across the winter.
So it was quite interesting when he talked about the fact that there were other teams that also, they're also motivated. They're also trying to get the best car they can, also trying to extract every millisecond they can from next year's package. But he said that they were in a strong position at kind of relative to others, maybe based on what they've gone through this year, because Ferrari have had their own struggles. Red Bull haven't really. And George Russell implied earlier this season that there are a few issues that they stumbled across that they believe other teams might stumble across in the future. future that they've now been able to rectify for next year's car and also partly for the W13, so it'll help them going forward, right? I think that's kind of what James Vos is getting at, that that's one advantage they have in that they've, effectively what did Thomas Edison do to make the light bulb? His point was that, he hadn't failed 1,000 times, he just discovered 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb, so then you get it right. So the expert is the person who's failed more times than anybody else rather than the person who succeeds on the first try. That might be what they're getting across there, that they understand a lot of what not to do on these year's regulations or these new set of regulations because they, learned a lot last year and therefore they have a better idea going forward. So maybe the failure can lead to success, whereas if Red Bull nail it out the gate as they did, yes, they might be still on top of the starter next year, but down the line, it could give Mercedes a lasting advantage, especially with Red Bull's disadvantage in the testing time. We'll see if any of that comes true, of course, but it is one edge that Mercedes probably have over their opposition. Now, one edge they don't have is this front wing design. We saw them unveil this, I believe, in Austin at the USA Grand Prix. Then they never used it that weekend because I think the rest of the package that they brought on in Austin was maybe they just put a front wing on or they put the flooring on or something, and then they completed upgrades with a new front wing, I think, in Mexico. But they presented this idea with these kind of flap separators, which looked rather, it's an interesting idea. We hadn't seen any other team try something like this. And Mercedes never actually ran this on their car. It seemed like they'd got the approval to use this from the simulator, the CAD kind of designs they sent to the FIA. But then when they actually turned up in real life, the FIA were like, yeah, we're not sure about that. Let us think about it. And they weren't able to run this front wing in any of the races towards the end of the season. And now they've basically banned this idea entirely. The whole point really is of these new regulations is to reduce the incidence of dirty air for the car behind, and anything that creates like additional turbulence in the airflow that is not what the regulations maybe intended to be there is probably going to get struck down. So they've changed the wording, and now it seems to to ensure that these slot gap separator brackets must now provide structural connection between the consecutive profiles, which I guess was not what they were intended to use in the Mercedes case. The dimensions and connecting proximities have also been altered to reinforce the governing body's original intent, and in a bid to prevent teams trying to pursue the concept in a different way that got around the primary request in the regulations. And this is the thing about certain items on the car, whether their primary intent of that item is to be aerodynamically efficient or whether it's to do something else. It's the same with the wing mirrors, right, from this last season. I think it says in the regulations they're not meant to be used for aero, but obviously, you've got to design the wing mirror such that it's aerodynamically efficient. You're not just going to put a brick there. You've got to design something. But yeah, if you're using that if its primary intent in their eyes is to gain some aerodynamic advantage by, putting a massive spike on the end of it, and making the wing mirror look like a bullet train, then you have issues. So always grey areas here. The teams have tried to exploit things. That's now been shut down, just like has, the Mercedes. I think there was some other leading edge of the wing that has got banned, and also the Aston Martin rear wing design, which is a bit of a loophole as well, has got banned also for next season. So, kind of expected to happen, but all the teams will continue to push the boundaries wherever they find them. Quick note before we close out the video here, another bit of news from the FIA in potentially shortening the DRS zones. This is something I mentioned the other day, certainly at specific circuits, for example, Spa, and you guys might even remember back in the Qatar Grand Prix in 2021, where there were no overtakes that happened apart from on the main straight, and the main straight overtakes were always straight forward, it seemed. They would, Perez, I think, was a bit down the field. He would just be blasting past people, no problem at all, with DRS on the straight there, and we didn't really get anything else other than that. So, look, I think DRS should be there to aid with an overtake, but, as they describe, we don't want overtaking to be inevitable or actually easy, because it's an interesting point about the inevitability. You often do see circumstances where, okay, yeah, the Red Bull's within 4/10 of the car in front, it's GG down the straight, and it almost always is, and the car being overtaken has really no repercussions against it. I think we even said during the Belgian Grand Prix weekends that, yeah, maybe the DRS straight on the Kemmel straight needs to be reduced in length because, yes, still the Williams was tough to overtake there, but most of the other cars, if you did have DRS and were within half a second, you'd get that move done. And there is an argument that says, look, you've still got to make the overtake actually a fight, because it's tough to get too excited about a DRS overtake when you already know it's going to happen way before the straight even starts. So I don't know, the solution would be that DRS is probably still necessary, but on certain tracks where overtaking was almost too easy in 2022, just cut down the length of the DRS zones. I think that's a very viable idea. Keep them as they are in Singapore and, some other circuits as well, Japan, for example, or stuff like this, where, overtaking isn't so easy, but for the tracks where it is almost too too easy. Like Belgium, you could argue, could you get away running Spa with no DRS? Maybe you couldn't quite, but I think that certainly the main straight DRS into La Source is probably completely unnecessary as well. So, you know, there's probably a few things they could think about here to make the racing better on circuit specific, let's say, because I mean, if you guys have seen the Las Vegas track that looks like the upside down pig, the bit that they're on the strip is like such a long straight. I don't know how long the DRS zone is meant to be there, but if it's like any length at all, it's just going to be easy overtakes every single time, or a mega DRS train, but kind of behind a car that's rapid in a straight line in the first place. And the community seems kind of split on this. This is about 5,000 votes. I went for yes. I'm kind of happy for them to reduce certain DRS zone lengths, not always, right? You know, for example, Zandvoort's, I think it's perfectly fine as it is, but you know, certain tracks it might be necessary going forwards. But you guys might disagree in the comment section below, and feel free to at that. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this down there. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I'll see you next time.